Thank you. I have to admit I was a little concerned when I started hearing the prayer in rhyming couplets, particularly when my name came into it, but I was happy that it wasn't a limerick. So there's long been a debate over what is the world's oldest profession. So there was a surgeon, and there was an engineer, and a politician. They were having this debate, and the surgeon said, well, you know, Eve was created from a rib from Adam, and obviously that would have taken a surgeon. So obviously surgery is the oldest profession. And the engineer said, well, the world was created in 6 days out of chaos. That would have taken an engineer. And the politician said, well, who the hell you think created the chaos? I'd like to lie to you and tell you that we're doing better than that, but often we're not in Washington. We haven't had a budget in 3 years. We don't do appropriations bills. If you come to me and say, oh, this is a program we really need for Jefferson County, I'll never get to vote on it, in committee or otherwise. Because what ends up happening is 3 days before a deadline, they send over a 2,000-page continuing resolution. That just means we continue funding everything as we have. Now, the problem with that is it is literally kicking the can down the road. We're spending over $1 trillion every year that we don't have. So if you just continue spending it, you don't alter anything you're doing, and they say, oh, it's all 66% of it's mandatory spending. Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and interest. That's 2/3 of your budget. Well, that'd be fine if maybe it were staying there, but it's on course to become 100% of your budget within a decade or less. They keep moving the numbers up. Those 3 programs and interest will consume all of the tax revenue. There'll be nothing left, or we have to borrow everything else at that point. Nothing left for national defense, nothing left for roads, nothing left for anything else you're coming to ask me about. There's nothing left unless you fix entitlement. So I tell people, I don't care whether you're conservative or liberal, if you want something from government, come to me and tell me that you're in favor of fixing the problems that are taking all the money. If you're not serious about it, because there is no money, and it's not tenable just to keep borrowing more money. Now people say, why won't y'all just compromise? If you just hold hands and sing Kumbaya, everything would be okay. It might be better, but I would like to tell you about a couple of areas where I have tried to compromise or reach out, because you read certain newspapers, you might not think that ever is happening. But I will tell you that a couple of instances that are very prominent. I rode down to Kentucky on Air Force One with the president to talk about roads and bridges. How do we come up with more money for roads and bridges? You've wanted, or at least most of you have wanted, a new bridge or bridges in Louisville for years now. It's about a $2 billion project. They want the same thing in Kentucky. The bridges are as old as I am. You've got 50-year-old bridges. The one that was closed down here, I think, is about the same age as I am. They have to be repaired, but you have to set priorities. You've got to say, don't just tell me borrow more money, but you know, your road budget each year is about $420 million. So how are you going to get $2 billion out of a road budget that the total budget is $420 million unless you come up with more money? So you have to tell me where to take it from, because I don't think we should borrow it. I think we're already borrowed to the hilt, and that the debt is an enormous drain on our country. So I would say, let's figure out where we get it. There are areas where we spend it, maybe we shouldn't be spending it. We spend $30 billion a year on Department of Energy loans. Who do they go to? Billionaires. The president complains about the top 1% not paying their fair share. It's the top 1% getting the Department of Energy loans. The guy that got the Solyndra loan, the wife of one of the employees worked in the Department of Energy approving it. That was $500 million, and the guy's a billionaire. Why does he need any kind of taxpayer-funded loan? The Kennedy family got a $1.8 billion loan for BrightSource, another solar panel company that's also going bankrupt up in New England. So really, there are places we could look for money. We spend $30 billion on foreign aid. I think we've got problems at home before we send all the money overseas, not to mention the fact that a lot of the money is stolen once it gets there. I can go through decade after decade of examples of theft within the foreign aid program. Both sides have supported it. Both sides still support it, Republicans and Democrats. But I have tried to find common ground when I can. As a physician, when teachers would come into me, they were almost uniformly against No Child Left Behind. So am I. They're against it for practical reasons. They don't see it working, and they see the control taken away from local schools and sent to Washington. I was always against it just for philosophic reasons, that I believed in decentralized control of education. But we're on the same page. And so when Governor Beshear asked for a waiver, I'm a Republican, he's a Democrat. I signed on readily. I was quickly signing on, and we both sent a letter to the president saying, give us a waiver on No Child Left Behind. Let us be an experiment of innovation in our state. All the states should be this. You'll get more ideas because what we've been doing hasn't been working if we try new ideas. On the war, I'm one of the few Republicans that have been vocal saying it's time to come home from Afghanistan. I would have voted to go. I would have voted to go to Afghanistan. I wasn't there at the time. I think we can't let people attack us. I think we were right to get bin Laden. All of that is good. But I can't stand to see our soldiers being shot in the back by people who they've just finished training. One of the most tragic stories I saw recently was a father who's a military father, conservative family, patriotic family. His son volunteered and was in Afghanistan. His son calls him. He wanted to come home for his brother's football game, and he thought he was going to be discharged. The discharge got delayed by 3 days, but he was telling his father, I think the guy I'm training is going to kill me. The Afghan allied soldier that we are training, I think he's going to kill me. He said they whisper in our ears when no one's looking, we don't want you here. These are the people we're training. We're having trouble determining who's friend and foe, and when we turn our backs, they shoot us. It's time to come home, and I will work with Democrats to bring our soldiers home. One other topic came up, and I got a lot of grief in the media because I think the media sometimes is reactionary. I think they react immediately without ever looking at the facts. I held up a pipeline regulation bill, and they said, oh, that's just that Tea Party guy's not for any regulations. I held it up because I hadn't read it, and they wanted to pass it on Friday afternoon with nobody reading it. And so we looked into the matter, and we found out most of this was about an explosion in San Bruno, California. 8 people died. It was a tragedy. It was a 50-year-old pipeline. So we read the bill, and we found out that the National Safety Transportation Board puts out a report on accidents like this, on deadly accidents. It hadn't come out yet. So they were going to pass the regulations to fix the problem before they read the safety report. And it was coming out that week. I said, well, for goodness sakes, let's wait and read the report. So we read the report, and interestingly, the key finding that I thought was in the report was old pipelines are exploding. The new ones are not. There are accidents everywhere, but predominantly the accidents were in the old pipeline. So what did their regulations do? Grandfathered in the old pipelines, so all the regulations for checking the pipelines wouldn't apply to the very pipeline that exploded. So by reading the bills, we actually got them to change it and make it better. We actually went one step further. We read a 1985 National Safety Transportation report from Kentucky, Lancaster, Kentucky. There were 2 deaths, gas pipeline explosion. You know what they said in that report in 1985? Get rid of the grandfather clause. Sometimes what you see, the appearances of what you see, is window dressing. It's to placate you. It's to say, we're doing something, we're acting, here are these new regulations, we're helping you. But nobody reads them, and in the muddle of all of this, really they're trying to slide through something that's not going to work or change the situation, and often industry supports in this. Now, in this case, I won't blame the pipeline industry. When I brought it up, they did work with me, and we actually made the regulations stronger. And within about a week of this passing, they retested the San Bruno line and found another weakness and a defect in the pipeline. The pipeline was shut down. So you can do better by reading the bills, but often they don't want to read the bills. In the Senate rules, it says bills have to be online for 48 hours. So right before we left, we got a bill put online at midnight on my desk in printed form by 9 a.m. and voted on by noon the next day. And so I raised my hand. I said, I may not be the smartest at mathematics, but it doesn't sound like 48 hours. And so I made a point of order. It's the first time the point of order's ever been raised. They do it all the time, but I raised my hand and said, it's not 48 hours, you've broken your own rules. They just overrode me. They wrote 77-22 just to say it's Friday and we're ready to go home. And that's what happens. People wonder why Congress has such a low approval rating. It's 10%. I say it might be 2 or 3 times more than we deserve often. We don't obey our own rules. If you're not going to obey your own rules, you will lose the respect of those you're trying to represent. You should have time to read the bills. I don't think 48 hours is enough. When No Child Left Behind came up, which is another area where I've compromised, not only sending letters for the waiver, but trying to fix it, I called up the teachers union. Now, the teachers union hadn't given much money to Republicans, if ever any, okay? But I called them up and said, I want to try to fix this. It's been 10 years you've been complaining about it, myself also. Shouldn't we have a hearing? They gave us an 864-page bill on Monday and said we're voting on it on Wednesday. So I introduced 100 amendments. It takes them a long time to do an amendment. You can stretch that over months. So basically you stonewall the process, but I said I'll relinquish and I'll pull them all back if I get a hearing. So we did get a hearing, and I brought the Kentucky Principal of the Year up, and I brought a Kentucky Gifted and Talented Teacher up, and we at least got a hearing, and I thought it was helpful. We still didn't get rid of all No Child Left Behind, but I think the bill was a step in the right direction. With regard to figuring out how we move forward, we have to address and make decisions on what's most important. When I talked with the president about roads, I said, look, 10% of the road fund has to go to enhancements. That's the law of the land, has been for 10 years. What's an enhancement? Bike trail, flower beds, turtle tunnels. $3 million was spent on a turtle tunnel. I keep asking myself, is there a sign for the turtles? Tell them they have to go through the tunnel? $100,000 was spent on white squirrel sanctuary. Now, we love the white squirrels in Bowling Green. I think they're good luck, but I don't think they necessarily need a sanctuary. They live in trees. They go from one tree to the next. I'm not sure how you would tell them to stay in the sanctuary. We spent $200,000, and they get mad at me in Bowling Green, some on this, in the Corvette Museum on a driving simulator. You know, these are all good. If you've got surplus, if you've got $1 trillion surplus, by all means, build some more bike trails. But you've got to make decisions. You can't have bike trails and your bridge. If you've got to fix your bridge, maybe you got to live without bike trails for a while. I'm not against them. I ride a bike. We have a great bike trail in Bowling Green. You build that when you have surpluses. To get to surpluses, you got to fix all your other problems, but you can't just keep borrowing and adding these programs.